Hello and welcome to the Life Together podcast, where we share in meaningful conversation about living for Christ and loving one another. Thanks for joining today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Well, hey everyone, and welcome to this episode. Joining me today is Keith Stonehart, and Keith has had a big impact on my faith. I met Keith at Alabama camp probably 5 or 6 years ago when I was a camp friend, and he was a counselor there, and I'm very thankful for the ways that you've influenced my faith over the years, even though it's been just in spurts here and there, but it's meant a lot to me, and so I'm really glad that I've gotten to share that with everybody this weekend, and really glad that you're here and free to do this episode. So welcome, and then maybe just tell us a little bit about the work you're invested in right now and your family and just how life is going for the Stoneharts.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for that gracious introduction. That's probably more than I deserve, so thank you for that. So we've been at the Fultondale congregation now, just north of Birmingham, about 5 miles, for 10 years, and it's been the best thing that we ever did. I was not looking to become a preacher when I became one. The Fultondale congregation offered me the opportunity after meeting several other members of Fultondale at Alabama camp in 2010, our first year there, when my daughter Kaya was, I think, in the 5th grade. And so, we started going and did not preach full-time anywhere. I'd spoken a handful of times, but nothing substantial, and had to fill in for Rhodes Davis that night, who had gotten a severe migraine from sunburn, and got the invitation from a couple members of Fultondale to come speak, and I did. And after a couple times of that, they offered me the opportunity in 2012, and did not see it coming. Honestly, it was something that was never on my radar, and so we've been there 10 years now, and the work it's been I think it's been a two-way street. It's been as good for us as it has been for them, I hope. It seems like. I mean, the group has grown. I'm very passionate about evangelism. There's an aspect of my story that involves what I would call real evangelism, where I wasn't just taught, brought into the water, and then left. I mean, I was taught, brought to the water, and then discipled. I mean, Brownlee Reeves, Sarah Reeves' granddad, Sarah and Will Reeves, their granddad taught Kelly and I the gospel, my wife Kelly, and he studied with us every Monday night for 4 years after my baptism to make sure that we understood, doctrine, and we understood, wisdom and the different things that we were so lacking, because I didn't know anything. And so raising my daughter Kaya, who's now 24 and married and has just made me a grandpa,
It's awesome.
And I don't feel like a grandpa. I don't know very many grandpas that have mohawks, but here I am. And my son Cole, who's here with me this weekend, he's 16. Raising them in that environment was something I didn't get, and something I always wanted for them. And of course, I was going to raise them within the church anyway, because Kelly and I become Christians when Kaya was 2, and Cole was born, 7 years later. And so we were going to do that anyway. We were going to raise them the way that the Bible tells us. Because we were learning along as well. But being there at Fultondale and being a part of the work and being able to bring Cole to events like this and Alabama camp, and he's gone to a couple other camps. We went to North Carolina camp this year, and it's been great in seeing how it's helped shape and mold my children in ways that I probably couldn't, because there are certain things I just can't relate to, other things I can relate to, but I don't know what it's like to have so many good godly friends. I didn't have that growing up, So being able to trust them with a group of people that I know are safe has been great. And so the last 10 years have absolutely been the best 10 years of my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. And I've visited Fultondale like a couple times, and I love that church, love the people there. Really good group, and thankful for the work that you and your family are doing down there. But last night, you kicked things off for us at the teen weekend, and I guess I guess this is good to share. You walked up there and your notes weren't working, so you just went off the cuff,
Yep.
right?
So of course, I came fully prepared. I wrote a lesson. I had 5 points that I wanted to make, in a 15-minute span about friendships, right? And about how important it is to have these godly friendships and what it means to me to see my kids having those. And I get up there and my iPad won't unlock. I keep putting in the code, and I guess I'm going so fast I'm missing a number every time. And after the third time, it just locks. And so I was like, okay, well, I've got my phone as a backup. And so I pull out the phone, I open my OneNote app, and because I never synced it when I was connected to Wi-Fi, because my iPad isn't wireless, right? It's not cell service. It just showed a blank note there. And so I was like, okay, plan C, which was I'm going to read I know my passage. I know my John 15 passage. I'm going to read that passage, and then we'll just see what happens.
Yeah.
And so, I ended up just talking about finding your people. That's that passage where Jesus says, I no longer call you my servants, but I call you my friends.
Yeah.
Those were his people. And so when you really break that idea down of finding your people, Jesus found his people. Right. We could say, he chose them, or we know they were chosen. Great show, by the way. But more than that, especially Peter, James, and John, those were his people. He had a group of people, and he shows us how important to have that group is. And so I just talked about last night about finding your people and what it meant to me to find mine, and how the people that I found in the church, the Christians that I came in contact with, had everything to do with my success or failure. Yeah. They had everything to do with my shaping me to if I'm helpful at all in the kingdom now, it's because I had people involved with me in that they weren't going to let me they just weren't going to let me fall through the cracks.
Yeah.
And so I once I started talking and I sort of tapped into that place, it kind of just came out as naturally as it could, but there was about 2 minutes there where there was complete fear, and I was like, oh no, what am I gonna do? And but God saved me like He always does, right?
Yeah.
So
well, it was really powerful, and I know me and Lawrence have felt moments like that, but it was really powerful what you shared. In what you shared was you didn't always have that. You didn't always have those people and those relationships. You didn't grow up in the church, and so let's kind of peel back the curtain on that a little bit.
Okay.
Like share your story. Where is all that coming from? How did you end up finding your people, and how did God work in your life to bring you where you are today?
So I'll try to give you the shortest version possible, because I've got 50 years of of life now. And so, and I told you this before, that no matter how embarrassing some of the details are, the truth is that none of my story is about me, right? It's all about Him.
Yeah.
And, we sing Amazing Grace, and the line that says, 'twas grace that saved a wretch like me. I live that every single day in the forefront of my mind, because it was grace that saved a wretch. And I truly believe, and probably because I still sin, I still consider myself a wretch, in progress. And, but there are a few absolute truths in life, and I think that the first thing is people need to know that God loves you. Mm. That is an absolute truth, and that He wants you. And He's made being with Him and being friends with Him possible. And I think the thing that, those all sound really good to everybody. God loves you, God wants you, and He made being with Him possible. But the fourth thing that I think people need to know that's an absolute truth also is that Satan will do everything he can to keep you from believing the first three are true. And I'll tell you another truth about Satan is he won't wait for you. He won't wait for you to grow up to come after you. He'll come after you young. First time I drank alcohol, I was 9. Right, I was 9 years old. And I think, probably like a lot of 9-year-olds, it was curiosity. I'd see my dad drink, and I thought, okay, well, what's that about? What's that like? But more than that, the 9-year-old me was looking for a way to not feel the way that I did. And that's kind of a heavy thought for a 9-year-old. But for the 4 years previous to that, I had been sexually molested by an older family member, a cousin, and not a cousin by blood, but a cousin by marriage into the family. And obviously when I think back on it now, he was older than me. I mean, I think he was 14 or 15 at the time. And, of course, when you're young, you want to hang out with the older kids, I'm 5 years old. So yeah, the older kids are a draw, right? But what I think about now that I hadn't considered even then is that, how he knew to do that it had probably been done to him too, right? And he was just perpetuating a cycle. And at 5, you don't know that that's not normal. You don't understand. You're just doing what the older kids say that we're doing, and hey, this is a secret. And of course you want to be in on the secret when you're 5, you want to be in that know. And so, I didn't know that I'd been lied to. I didn't know that I was being hurt. I just, you're just going with what it is. And so, by the time I was 9, I knew, right? At 5, I didn't know, but by the time I was 9, I knew that, because this went on for a couple of years. When he lived so close to us. And, as much shame and confusion and frustration that a 9-year-old could have, I had it. And so my 9-year-old mind was looking for an escape. And so then by the time I was 14, I graduated to marijuana and LSD. And by the time I was 16, I graduated to cocaine. I got introduced to cocaine at a party that I should not have been at. I was 16 years old and I was partying with people that were in their 20s. Because I had, in the meantime, I had become part of a rock band in high school. One thing I've always had a natural gift for, and I don't think this is bragging to say, but I recognize it, but I always had an inclination for music. I started playing the drums right around that 9-year-old age. It felt good to hit something, and so I started playing the drums, and it totally by ear, and MTV, right? MTV back then used to play music videos. It doesn't anymore, but and I would watch these drummers, and I was just mesmerized, and so I started playing the drums, and convinced my family to get me a drum set for Christmas. And then by the time I was 13, I'd moved from drums to guitar, and my brother had taught me a few chords, and I taught myself to play guitar. And by the end of that summer, I could play just about any song on the radio, because that's all I would do. I'd sit and play with the radio all day. And I'd begun to sing as just sort of a natural thing too. Was singing, playing guitar, and so music came very easy. So I was in a rock band of guys who had all graduated high school, and I was 14 when I joined this band. It's about the time I'm 16. We're playing in bars all over Atlanta, that I should not be in. I shouldn't have been allowed in the building, because it wasn't like an all ages venue that served alcohol. It was a bar, right? It was people went there to drink, and I'm in these bars, and I'm playing with grown men, in a band, and and all the things that go with that. And so and I had an appetite for destruction, for sure. I was 16 years old and angry, because I still was struggling with all the previous, right? Because especially by the time you're 16 and it's the 1980s, it's, in 1989, I was 16 and wrestling with what had happened to me, because, at some point you recognize that what happened to you, there was a homosexual aspect to that, right? That I didn't ask for, but it happened. And so you're then struggling with these questions of your own sexuality. And am I gay? I don't feel gay, but I better make sure. And so I'm at 16 years old, I'm as promiscuous as they come. I'm sleeping with every girl that will let me, trying to convince myself, right, that I'm okay. And, of course, that cycle of hurt people. So, I mean, I think one of my biggest regrets in life is that period in my life, because how many people did I hurt in that process? Well, the trail of destruction that I left because I needed to prove something in myself, and these people were a means to an end, and I wasn't treating them like people, nor was I treating the gift of sex in the God-given way that He had given us. And I didn't know that, right? I didn't grow up religious. So, the band, I graduate high school, our band hits the road. I'm on the road 25 days a month most of the time, you know, and, when I'm 23, I meet this girl. And she's unlike any girl that I've met because there was a morality about her that was really attractive to me. I'd never, listen, all the girls that I was spending time with were, just as hurt and broken as I was. And so we were just contributing to our own cycle of destruction. And when I met Kelly, she was different. She would tell me no. And that was really attractive to me because I'd never met a girl with limits. And I wanted to know what that was about. Where does this come from? What is this no that you keep telling me? What are you talking about? Now, to be fair, she wasn't really behaving either. Neither one of us were Christians. I was an atheist for the most part, probably more out of convenience, but she had grown up in the church, but she never had become a Christian, and she had left home, and so she's in her early 20s, and she's bartending, and I'm playing in the bar that she's in, and so we meet organically, but she still had this. You could tell there was still something inside of her that had been planted there at a young age, where she really had her life together, and that was super attractive to me, and I wanted to know all about that. And so we began dating, and then not long after we got married. And in that short 2-year period, I stopped doing drugs as much. The cocaine sort of took a back seat because I had this new addiction, and it was her. And of course, I'm still in my band. We're still playing. We're not touring 25 days a month anymore. Now we're just doing long weekends, and then I'm working framing houses during the week when I'm there. To supplement, because we actually made really good money in the band. When you're playing 25 days a month, you make pretty good money, but you can't have a relationship and tour 25 days a month. That not a relationship that's going to mean anything. Who wants to see their significant other twice a month or something? So we got married and found out my daughter Kaya was coming. And that was kind of an eye-opening moment for me. And it was in that time that I really began to think about God. Could this be possible? Because I'll tell you what, when she was born, my eyes were opened to a whole different reality that I really considered that, hey, there might be a God because this is incredible. And I also realized that I didn't love my wife. I thought I did. I thought my version of it was love, but I really thought she was just very pretty, and I liked the way that she made me feel, but that's not love, right? Love has nothing to do with how she makes me feel. It's everything to do with how I express that to her, right? Love isn't love until you give it away, right? Mm-hmm. And all I was doing was taking. And when my daughter came, I realized there was nothing she could give me, right? Yeah. There was absolute, I'll cry. There was nothing she could give me to express love to me. And this feeling was all about me giving for her. And I thought, whoa. I was like, this isn't the same. This isn't the same as what I have with Kelly. And I'm scared now. And I really started thinking about my life and how am I going to raise this other human being that I'm completely responsible for now when I'm still a mess. I still had unresolved issues with my childhood. I still had addiction issues. I had all the things that come as sideline and peripheral issues with those things. And so I started trying, man, but the addiction had me. And I would try for a while and I would fall, and I would try for a while and I would fall. And then naturally, Kelly and I began to have problems, because of it. And like a lot of couples in the world, and not you know what, and I won't reserve this strictly to the world because it happens in the church too. Because I've counseled a lot of couples that go through this. But, naturally what happens sometimes when problems arise like that, intimacy goes away. And, not having God as a standard, not having good biblical friends to help push me back in the right direction, or anyone to give me wise counsel. I did what the world does, and I started looking for someone who would, and I did. I ended up, after one of our shows, going home with a woman, and one of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life, because I'd never been unfaithful to her before that. And then in this moment, I had broken a vow, and I didn't know how serious that was at the time, but I knew something wasn't right. It wasn't what I wanted. I knew that. As soon as it was over, I was like, this isn't what I wanted. I thought it was. In your mind, you convince yourself, that this is what you want. And I think that's why James 5:16 is so important to me too. Because let's just say if you and I had been friends and I'd have called you that morning and said, hey, Jarrett, I'm going to cheat on my wife today. You'd have been like, dude, no, you're not. Right? Yeah. Because the two things happen. When I say something out loud, it's real. Right? If I think it in my head but I don't tell anybody, then I can justify it all I want. But the moment I speak it into existence, it's out there. And now you've heard it, and I've heard it. I hear how ugly it sounds myself. And so I think there's power in confessing, right? But who was I going to confess to, right? And so once it was over, I was like, this isn't what I wanted. This was wrong. This was wrong. And I just decided I wasn't never going to do it again, and went on. Well, it surfaced. She found out, right? And I'm glad she did, because two reasons. Because it was a heavy burden that I was dying keeping it from her. This inner conflict of, man, I've just, And so the second reason I'm glad is because it led us to the gospel. She left, right? She took Kaya, who was 2 then, and she left. And I came home, and I was going to get high. Right, I had called the drug dealer. I got me an 8 ball of cocaine, and I was going to forget, And I never said this out loud at the time, but maybe even just die, right? And just, what, this whole thing has gone too far. This needs to be over, And so I wasn't looking to commit suicide, but I was okay with dying at the time because, I had made a complete mess. Total mess, right? And so as I'm about to use drugs, my brother-in-law, Mark Bowman, Drew's dad, shows up at the door, and he comes in, and I'm like, what do you want, Mark? He said, I just want to talk, man. And I said, you want to talk about how bad of a person I am? He said, no. He said, I'm just here to see if I can help. And so I'm projecting all of my guilt on him, like he's going to judge me, but he's not there to judge me. He's there to help me, and I keep fighting him, And so he finally kind of disarms me and just says, listen, man, I just want to talk to you. I'm not going to try anything. I just want you to tell me what's going on with you. And so for the next 3 hours, that's what I did. I told him every ugly truth. I told him about, the abuse when I was younger. I told him about, the drugs, the alcohol, the other woman, all this. I just told him everything. And I remember him looking at me really intensely across the table. I'm a pretty big guy, Back in, of course, in my 20s, I was a little more ripped than dad bod, but it was, and I knew how to fight, right? And so Mark's looking at me, and I could take Mark in a fight. But man, he had determination in his eyes, and he was looking at me like he wanted to take me outside in the yard and beat me for all I was worth. And in that moment, he probably could have, because I didn't have any of that determination that he had. There was sincerity there, and I was a little intimidated. Not gonna lie, this 5'8" man is sitting across from me that I'm thinking, you're not gonna hurt me, but he was gonna hurt me in that moment, but he wasn't. And he says, listen, he said, I know you don't believe in God. And he said, but you have lived your way for 28 years, and you've made a total mess. I said, Mark, are you inviting me to church? He says, I am, because what have you got to lose? He said, you've done everything else your way, and look at it. Your way doesn't work. You need to let somebody else drive. And I said, Mark, I don't believe in God. He goes, I know you don't. He said, but he believes in you, and if you will just commit to coming, I think I can convince Kelly to meet you there. And so that got my attention because I wanted nothing more than for Kelly to come home, And so he convinced me to meet him there, and Kelly met me there, and we appeared to be together to everyone there. We couldn't have been further apart, but no one knew that besides us and Mark and his wife Denise, Kelly's sister. And I don't remember what the lesson was on. I take that back. The Bible class was on Revelation 19. And I remember thinking to myself, what have we walked into? Because he's up there talking about the robe dipped in blood and making war and all this, and I was like, whoa, what are we doing? But no, I don't remember the invitation. I don't remember the songs that were sang. I don't remember anything except when it was over and how apprehensive I had been about going because I'd never set foot in a church in my life. And I remember thinking to myself, these people are going to judge me and they're going to, laugh at me. They're going to, whatever. And that couldn't have been further from the truth, man. It was when class was over, people were just, they wanted to know who we were, and they wanted to welcome us, and they wanted to tell us that they were glad to see us. And I'm in my rock band phase where my hair was jet black, about 4 inches long all over and spiky everywhere, right? The mohawk is tame, right? The mohawk I have now is tame compared to what I had going on then. And I had both my ears pierced. I had my nose pierced. I've got tattoos. I mean, I'm that guy sitting in this building of people that I think no one here could possibly understand me. And I couldn't have been more wrong. That couldn't have been further from the truth. Because they just wanted to talk and let me know they were glad that I was there, and they didn't care where I come from. They didn't care about anything up until that moment except that I was there. And I never felt that. Because part of whenever I was in my rock band, part of what I was looking for was acceptance, right? I didn't get a lot of acceptance from my dad. One of the things I left out about my childhood is my dad was extremely abusive to my mother and myself, and physically, mentally, verbally, all of it. And so I was the music aspect appealed to me very much because there was acceptance there. And so I go into this church thinking these people are going to judge me and reject me, and what I got was accepted. And I was like, I could come back to this. I could come back again. And, of course, Brownlee didn't let us out of the lobby that night without a study. He comes, Brownlee's a big man. And he's 6'4". He's got size on him. And he's comes up, and he's this big voice, and he introduces himself. I'm Brownie Reeves, and he says, you ever study your Bible? I said, sir, I don't have a Bible. He says, I'll bring you one. How about tomorrow night? He just did not let me out of that lobby without agreeing to a study. And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, it'll get Kelly back to the house tomorrow night. Maybe I can convince her to stay, And so we began studying with Brownlee. And he let me ask all of my dumb atheist gotcha questions that I thought I had. He shot them down just as simple as could be. Shot holes and everything. And, he did something that really caught my attention was that every question I asked, he would flip to a scripture. He would turn the Bible around and push it across the table to me. And he would say, well, what does that say? And he was making me read the Bible. And I didn't catch it then, but I know now what he was doing. No one has ever obeyed the gospel that didn't read it for themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what he's doing. He's making me read it. I'd never read a Bible. I didn't know anything about the Bible, and so he's making me read the Bible. And after about 2 weeks of this, man, I couldn't really argue with him anymore. And we began to legitimately study because I saw there was merit in it, and it was getting Kelly home those nights. And then we confided in him what we were dealing with and what we were going through. And Kelly had expressed, again, grace that I get emotional about, that she wanted to reconcile, and he said, now, you don't have to. And that's probably the thing that stuck with me the most is she didn't. She did not have to reconcile with me. But what could be more graceful than not just reconciling and forgiving me, but keeping us married. That's why I think a lot about Jesus and us, that every time we commit spiritual adultery, he could put us away. He could put us away, and he'd be right to do so. But that's grace, right? He takes us back. He reconciles. He makes us friends again with him, and that's always been a grounding motivator for me because of the grace my wife showed me. And so then we begin this process of learning and studying, and I essentially traded one addiction for another. After a 9-month period, and I relapsed, and I went forward. I talked a little bit about that last night. After that period, and everyone knew then what was going on with me because it had been a secret up till then. Then I really got to experience what church was about. That it wasn't a building, that it really was a people, and these people get into your life, and not in a nosy, busybody way, but like a family would, like this genuine concern and care for your well-being. It's not just a friendly, hey, how are you today stuff. It's really like, hey, how are you today? It's a very different question when you ask it that way. And I learned that I had people, and that, stark contrast to when we walked away from the music scene, when I quit my band and she quit her bartending job. We had this group of people that we thought were our friends. Nobody called us. Nobody said, hey, where are y'all? The phone didn't ring. It's like we had exited that lifestyle with these people that we thought we were so close to, and nobody cared. And it made me realize that those people were just there because of what I brought to them, and that's not love either, is it? Right? So I'm beginning to build these models about what love is, and what grace is, and what redemption is, and all these stories that I'm learning in the Bible that are true, and the principles are timeless, and they, you start seeing those things in your own life, and so you start putting yourself in the story when you read it. You're like, oh yeah, that's just like me. Oh yeah, that's just like me too. Oh yeah, and that happened just like me. And you start saying, man, I'm Peter in this story, or man, I'm David in this story. Or sometimes it's, oh man, I'm Cain in this story. I mean, there's all these different things that you start inserting yourself into, because you're like, when Jesus tells Peter to get behind him and calls him Satan, that's me, right? That's me. And it started clicking, man. And so I just became addicted. I became addicted to studying the Bible. I wanted to read it all the time, and I wanted to study it all the time, probably too much. And Kelly even told me, she goes, hey, listen, you're a little obsessed with this. And I was like, oh, it's this or cocaine. So and she's like, well, keep reading, and I realized that about myself. I am an addictive personality. If I like something, I love it. And if I love it, I want it all the time. And what that became for me was Jesus, and this obsession almost with getting to know him, this, because the thing that Brownlee got me with finally was a question about time. He says, Keith, what's the date today? I'll never forget. It was November the 21st, 2001. He says, what is that? I said, it's today's date. He goes, what's it based on? I said, I don't know. He said, well, 2001 represents something. I said, years. He goes, okay, 2,000 years from what? I was like, well, I don't know. He says, well, think about it, Keith. He goes, everything before that time period was called AD, or BC. Sorry, BC. He said, what's that stand for? And it was before the before Common Era people showed up. He says, before Christ, right? BC stands for before Christ. And everything after that we're in now is AD. He goes, you know what that stands for? I was like, no idea. He says, what's Anno Domini, which means the year of our Lord. He says, so if you put those two concepts together, and we're in 2001, that's from 2001 years from something. I said, well, Jesus' birth? He said, Jesus' birth. He said, our entire system of time is based upon that event. He said, so you can deny him if you want to. He said, but every time you sign the date on a check, you acknowledge him. So fast forward back to where I'm really addicted. I want to know all about this man. I want to know all about the things that led up to him and the things that matter now. And it just sent me on this deep dive that I was in for 4 years, studying and reading everything I possibly could. And so in 2010, when I got that opportunity to fill in and preach for Rose Davis, I wasn't prepared, but it was kind of like last night. I read Ecclesiastes 12, and I just started talking. And what had happened was at that point, I had, 9 years of Bible study, 4 years of that really addicted Bible study. But I had a whole lifetime of experience, to that point. I had the years before I was a Christian and the years since, culminating in this, and I don't really know what to call it, but it was, I was able to relate so much of those things with my own life. And so it came out like I was just talking. That I didn't really have to think too deeply about it, because I just knew these things were true. And that's not a habitual practice. I still like to confirm, what I'm teaching. But at that time, it happened, and so got the opportunity to come and work at Fultondale, and and so I've dedicated myself to the one another's, the concept I talked about last night, because that's what made the difference for me. From 2001 until now, it's been my people that I found, that found me, and the coming out of the darkness, so to speak, where, Kelly and I mean, our marriage, when we reconciled, there was a 5-year period that was really difficult, where I'm trying to rebuild trust with her, and I'm also trying to take over as a leader, something I knew nothing about. I'm trying to be the spiritual head of household, which I knew nothing about. I'm trying to be a good husband, which I knew nothing about. And I'm trying to be a father. And so that first 5-year period was rough, man. And we fought. And there again, we had good people intervening, counseling, talking, often, getting me to open my eyes a little more, and getting her to open her heart a little more, and to notice and be vulnerable, because neither one of us wanted to be vulnerable because of how we got to that place. And so I'm just saying that over the last 2 years now of being a Christian, those are the high points, man. It's been the people. Yeah. It's been the church. Jesus is the anchor of it all, and that's where I keep my eyes focused. But man, my conversion is still going on. Yeah. You know what I mean? When people say, "Give you a conversion story," I'm like, "Well, I'm still in it. I don't know what to tell you. I'm still there. I'm still, every day is still a process of letting go of something and taking on something else. I learned that about myself with addiction, is that you can't just give away one behavior and not take on another one. And at first it was physical things like push-ups. That's why I got into weightlifting, and because I needed some sort of outlet for the times when my mind would want to use. That will never go away from me. I think my brain, just from that being my only coping mechanism for years, whenever I am confronted with stress or something that I don't want to face, or whatever it might be, my fight or flight is flight, right? I just want to escape. And I think a lot of that's probably because of the abuse from my dad. I just, in my mind, I go back to that place and I just want to run. Well, and I've realized that being a Christian man means that I've got to fight, right? And so I can't just run. Run if you need to, but I think that for the most part, a Christian man's job is to stand in the gap, protect these people that I care about. And if it means I take a few shots, I take a few shots. And I've just had to come to grips with that. But I'm just saying all that to say that in this last 22 years of becoming a Christian and now to the role that I serve as a minister, it's become very important to me to help people the way that I was helped. To not just study with them to the water, but to study with them beyond. To help them understand, to be a soft place for them to land, because they're going to have many hard crashes, right? They're going to have, one of the things that Satan is good at is convincing you that you're not done, one of the most interesting stories. I'm not trying to get off on a tangent too much, but I know we're bound by time to some degree. But Jesus tells us, out of the 170 women that are mentioned in Scripture, he only tells us to remember Lot's wife. And I think that's really important, because what he's doing in that admonition is, when he says, remember Lot's wife. She looked back, right? And that phrase, looking back, in the original Hebrew, means to look back with longing, right? She looked back with longing for what God said, we're finished with that, right? And so when Jesus says, remember Lot's wife, he's saying, don't look back at what we're finished with. Look forward to what's coming, right? And look forward to what I've got prepared for you. Don't look back, because what had happened to her, she got stuck, right? She turned to a pillar of salt. And so she's stuck forever in a moment that she was supposed to be moving through. She's in a place she was only supposed to be passing through. And she looks back at something that he said, hey, I'm done with that. You're done with that. We're going over here. And I think that's a strong metaphoric story to us, that we can't look back on those things with longing, right? There's nothing about my past that I look back on with any sort of admiration. I'm thankful for it, because it obviously has contributed to the place in life where I am now. But man, that's why I say that's not about me.
Yeah.
The story is about him, and we're finished with that. And
Yeah.
And I'm happy to tell it and share it, because I want people to maybe understand that you're not alone in whatever you're struggling with. And because I found out that I wasn't alone, I'm surrounded by all these people that I'm, when I came forward that night at Mountain View, and I'm thinking, this is it, they're going to kick me out for sure now. I had these people coming up to me telling me, you know what, Keith, I don't struggle with cocaine addiction, but man, I can't let go of pornography. And I had women coming up to me telling me things like, man, if I could have a drink right now, I would. And, and I'm looking at these people like, wait a minute. I thought you guys were these people that had your lives all together. And you know what? They were just like me. They were they were struggling with something. And so we may not be looking back with longing, and so I tell this story just so that people know that they're not alone, and that they have people. Yeah. And I'm glad to be one of those people.
Yeah.
Well,
it reminds me of Paul in Philippians 3, forgetting what lies behind.
That's right.
And reaching forward to what lies ahead. I press on.
I press on.
Like that's what I hear in your story over and over again, just the pressing on. And maybe in moments when you didn't think you were going to press on, God surrounds you with those one another's, with your people.
That's it.
To push you forward. And then ultimately, jumping to Hebrews 12, letting go of the sin that so easily entangles us. We've got this great cloud of witnesses surrounded us, and there's maybe a lot of different interpretations of what exactly that means, but your people helping in whatever sense he means there, and then fixing your eyes on Jesus. And that becomes just your dogged determination to see him. And that's so, so powerful.
Yeah.
There was one part of your story that really resonated with me this time as you shared it, and that was when, I guess it was Mark Bowman, he said that God believes in you.
Yeah.
Like in this moment when you're across the table from him and it feels, maybe not even feels, life had fallen apart.
Yeah.
And what was that like to hear someone say in a moment at your absolute rock bottom, say, God believes in you?
Well, you can probably see there's a reaction happening. Because at that point in my life, no one had ever told me they believed in me. Ever. Right? No one had said, hey, man, I believe in you. You can do it. No one had ever said to me, and something I needed to hear as a boy, as a boy, I needed someone to say, I believe in you. You can do this. I'd only heard things like, you're not worth anything. You're never going to make it. No one's ever going to love you. Even my grandpa, he used to joke, but he would say things like, that boy's got a lot of quit in him, and which it was a funny saying to say that you hear an old Southern man say, but man, it cut me, And so when Mark told me that God believed in me, no one had ever said anybody believed in me. And I began to realize then, when I came to learn the story of the prodigal, and that the son had left, and the son had just wasted everything, and he finds himself in a mess. He lived his way, and he had made a mess, and I could really relate to that, right? Now, all of a sudden, when I'm reading that story, just like I was talking about earlier, I'm the prodigal son, right? That's me. There have been other times in my life I've been the older brother too, right? Yeah. And there have been times where I've been the father. And so it's funny how those, depending on what you're dealing with, those stories weave together. But I'm the younger son, and I'm in the mess, and I just want to go home. And the image I get in my mind with the father always looking off. He believed his son would come home. Right? That's what that image tells me, is that he believed his son would come home. He believed in his son, that he's going to come to himself and he's going to come home. And so every day he's looking off, believing that. No matter how big of a mess he was in, he believed. And so when he sees his son afar off, the scripture says that he runs out to meet him. Oh, man. That's why the song, we sang it last night, and you discovered yesterday when I sent you my slides that the song, The Goodness of God, is in my sermon, because when we learned that song at camp this year. And I got to play you a recording later of the campers singing that. But when he gets to the bridge in that song and it says, your goodness is running after me. Whew, that's the Father. Yeah. Running after his son because he believed in him. That's the goodness of God, is that he's not going to force us to love him, but man, he will run out to meet us where we are. And when Mark told me that God believed in me, it was, number one, it was the most ridiculous thing I'd ever heard. But it sounded so good, because I was like, how does God believe in me? Well, I understand now. I think there's an aspect of God where hope holds out for hope, and that he believes that we'll come home. He can't force it on us. He's never going to twist our arm behind our back and make us love him back or come home. And so he believes. He believes that he's made it possible. And that's why I said those fundamental truths. God loves you and God wants you, and he's made it possible, right? And what happens is that fourth truth of Satan trying to convince us those things aren't true is it work every day in our lives. And so it's those little things, man. It was simple as Mark telling me that God believed in me. That began this whole process of understanding that God's goodness has been run after me my whole life. Yeah. And it was the beginning of an awakening for me, and I'm still waking up. It's going to take probably the rest of my life, but you can't run away from God. Yeah. Eventually you just run into him. No matter how far you run in one direction, you're going to run into him. He's too big. And his goodness is too good. And so that made an impact on me. Yeah. Obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, I know we've got kids funneling into the building now. We can hear them in the hallway. But there's one question that comes to mind, having heard all of that, what you just shared, and you mentioned how everybody in their life often finds themselves in one of those two camps, the younger brother who goes off into the far country, the prodigal, or the older brother. Mm-hmm. And when you think about that within the church, what would you say to both, if you had the chance, what would you say to the younger brother, and what would you say to the older brother within a church context as people identify with one or the other right now? What would you say to them?
Well, I love what the father says to both of them. To the younger one, he doesn't actually say anything. That's the thing that blows me away about this story. The son comes home, he runs out, he meets him, and immediately the son's like, "Dad, I'm sorry. I blew it, and I'm sorry." And it's like the father doesn't even acknowledge him.
Yeah.
He's just like, "Hey, get the cow, get my ring. My son's home. We're throwing a party." Whew. He just wants to celebrate. And I think when someone comes home, man, you just say, "Welcome back. Yeah. Welcome home. I'm so glad you're here. Remember this." And to the older brother, you say the same thing. Remember this, because you'll be here someday, right? That's the thing about the prodigal son is that we all end up there at some point. That's what I'm saying. I've been the older brother too, where I thought I was above reproach, and guess what happened?
Yeah.
I fall. And the older brother doesn't even see the sin that he's committing in rejecting his brother's return.
Yeah.
Right?
In a lot of ways, he's just as far from home. He's just as far from the Father.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so to both of them, you say, remember this. Welcome home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for coming here this weekend, for sharing this story. But it's just amazing to hear what God has done in your life and what he's doing through you. And like you said, we're all that work in progress. God's working on all of us. He's molding and shaping us if we'll just let him.
That's right.
And it's a beautiful thing. And I'm so thankful that you got to share that today. And I love the impact that you've had on the kids. It's been an awesome weekend, and really glad that you're here.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. That was one of the quotes that I keep on my desk, and I don't know who said it. It's anonymous to my knowledge. But it says, "Be who you needed when you were young." And we just talked about when I was young, and I clearly needed somebody.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's my goal. And the thing is that I want people to understand who might be listening to this. You don't have to come from a godless family and neck deep in sin to need somebody. There are kids here today that need somebody. Maybe they're not dealing with the things that I was. Maybe it's something else, but it's something. And they need to know that there is somebody.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So.
Well, Keith, thanks so much. Love you. Thanks again.
Thank you. Love you too, brother.
Looking forward to the rest of the weekend.
Me too.